distinguished panelists, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me compliment NUS for organizing this very important dialogue for the third year in row, and that too this time they've been able to get the sponsoring of Planning Commission and the National Center for Education Development Research China. I also compliment them for co-sponsoring this very important dialogue between two countries facilitated by NUS, which are the most two populous countries in the world. And obviously, human resources are the most important resource for both of them. Friends, India is an enigma where past, present, and future coexist in peace and harmony in a very complex social milieu. Global Governance Report 2025, which was jointly prepared by National Intelligence Council and EU's Institute of Security Studies, says India would be the third most powerful country in terms of weightage by the year 2025, US having a weightage of 18%, China 16%, and India 10%. The entire European Union with 27 countries will have a weightage of only 11% in this power index. India is a member of International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, which is an exclusive club doing work on fusion energy at Kedar. Our Chandrayaan mission for moon exploration, our scientists working at Large Hadron Collider project, our collaboration with French Space Organization on Meghatropic project, our persons of Indian origin being at the helm of affairs in many of the 500 Fortune companies, most of the 500 Fortune companies having set up their R&D facilities in India, employing large number of Indian personnel, definitely speak volumes about the quality and inherent strength of our human resources. In the book, India Inside, The Emerging Challenge to the West, by Nirmala Kumar and Fanish Poonam, they have mentioned that GE's General Electric's Jack Welch lab in Bangalore is doing a large part of a turbine which GE will finally sell to Boeing as GE product. 1 in 4 engineers of General Electric is working in India, and mostly many of them are Indians. Similarly, Intel has $1 billion investment in India in R&D. While these are all on the positive side, on the flip side, our infant mortality rate is 47, even when our neighbor Nepal has 44, Sri Lanka 9, Thailand 16, China also I believe 16. Our MMR, that is mother mortality rate, per 100,000 births is 212 in India, as against 38 in China, 39 in Sri Lanka, and 48 in Thailand. We are almost at the bottom of the pyramid in the rankings for doing ease of business, or in the ranking for doing business, 132nd. We had 11 to 12 million mobile phones every month, but are not able to provide, unfortunately, safe drinking water and sanitation facilities to a large percentage of our population. In fact, the number of mobile owners in India is perhaps much higher than the people in India who have access to sanitation and lavatories. We have the largest number of billionaires in the world, but rank 128th in Human Development Index, and perhaps house the largest number of poor people in the world. despite having the largest number of English-speaking population, we also house the majority of illiterates in the world. Why I gave all this is this panorama of light and shades exhibit our formidable strength as well as the daunting challenges which India faces. Now, it is obvious that this widening gulf of knowledge and economic divide will have to be effectively bridged if we want to create an inclusive, sustainable society. This transformation will have to be led by the youth. Education being the main driver for economic growth, and education is also known as the best social leveler. This is the best gift a nation can give to its citizen, and if education fails, no nation can succeed. Keeping all this in mind, and to transform our large population, which hitherto was being considered as a social liability, to turn them into assets, the Government of India had increased their outlay on higher education in the last 5-year plan, the last year of which was over only in 2012 March. They increased the outlay by 10 times of the previous 5-year plan, previous 10th 5-year plan. We spent roughly rupees 40,000 crores on higher education. As a percentage of revenue of our budget, we have started spending about 19.5% of our entire budget, developmental budget on education, as against about 7.5% which we used to spend 5 years earlier. This has helped to a certain extent our gross enrollment ratio, which was only about 10 to 11%, has jumped to about 18% by the year 2012. But alas, none of our educational institutions figure in the top 200 rankings of either Geotron ranking or Times Higher Education Supplement or QS rankings. Of course, I am also proud to say that institutions like IITs and Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, are our institutions of excellence. Though they may not be ranking in those global rankings, but I think it would be good to note what Leslie Stahl of CBS US said once in one of their half-an-hour program, that you put Harvard, MIT, and Princeton together, and you begin to get an idea of what this school is in India. UNESCO had recorded in year 2003, that at no point of time in human history, the welfare of nations has been so closely linked with the quality and outreach of their higher education system. I think it continues to be as true, if not more true today. The government spending, the federal government spending on education has gone up by about 0.6% in the last 1 decade of the GDP. Our target is to spend 6% of our GDP on education. We are a federal structure, we have a federal structure. The state governments, unfortunately, in the last 1 decade, have started spending less on education. In fact, it has come down by 1% of GDP. So we are hovering around 3.8 to 3.9% of our GDP on education. So now it is a challenge for us to motivate our state governments, the provincial governments, to increase their spending along with the standing of the central government, so that we reach this elusive figure of 6% of GDP in the near future. Only 1/3 of our universities and 1/5 of our colleges have been able to get accreditation. Under 12th plan, which is starting this year, which has started rather I should say, the budget of higher education is again being almost tripled. It will be 1,11,700 crores. And an emphasis is being put on educational reforms. An attempt would be made to incentivize the state government so that they take a share of this central government funds. At the same time, they also put in their funds. But a condition is being put that they must usher in educational reforms, which include examination reforms like having semester system, choice-based credit systems, proper admission procedures for PhD admissions, third-party scrutiny of PhD thesis, regular revision of syllabi, extending autonomy, that is governance reforms, and mandatory accreditation. If the state governments follow these educational reforms, they will get the funding from central government. Our expenditure on higher education alone, that 3.8%, what I mentioned was on the entire education sector, including primary, secondary, and higher education. But today it's about 1.22% only for higher education. And this is proposed to be jacked up to 1.5%. And the three pillars for higher education will continue to be increasing access with equity and excellence. For the colleges and state universities, the funding is supposed to go up 2.5 times. That is, earlier it was 10,546 crores of rupees. It will become 25,000 crores. For equity initiatives, it will be jacked up almost 6 times from rupees 1,260 crores to rupees 7,000 crores. For educational institutions like IITs and other central government institutions, it will be more than doubled from 20,732 crores to 45,000 crores. And on research and innovation, it would be jacked up from 1,100 crores to 3,000 crores. The gross enrollment ratio, which is now about 18%, is targeted to go up to 25.2% by the year 2016-17. Unfortunately, we in India have a research deficit. We hardly spend 1% of our GDP on R&D, though in the last, and that too, what we spend on R&D, hardly 4 to 5% of that only gets done through our educational institutions. Though last finance budget, though in the last finance budget, Government of India have given an incentive that if you contribute something towards R&D through an educational institution, 200% of that you can get exemption from your taxable income. Despite that, I don't think it has made too much of a difference. We have a plan to increase the number of PhDs coming out, especially for science and engineering. In fact, in the IITs itself, the target is to have 10,000 PhDs in the coming 10 years. 10,000 PhDs they should be able to give every year after 10 years. India's overall share of publications has risen from 2.8% to 3.4%, though of course dwarfed by our friends from China, but still it's faster than the other two BRIC countries, Brazil and Russia. India's citations are 5.77 per paper, which I understand is comparable to China's, and of course is less than the world average of 10.81 citations per paper. In India, we have not been giving enough emphasis to the creation of IPRs. In fact, our professors and faculty rush to publish before going in for filing PCT applications without realizing that it's only USA which will give some priority for 1 year after publication, and Japan and Germany, I think they give for 6 months. No other country in the world would give an IPR once you have published a paper. There is an increasing awareness now in the country to relate scientific research to the needs of the society and marketplace and issues related to sustainability. I think our topic also was that we should discuss something about employability of our graduates. We have perhaps the largest number as far as the intake of engineering students is concerned. I think it's close to 1.5 million. 1.5 million is the intake capacity of our engineering colleges. But unfortunately, there are several reports which indicate that not more than 30 to 40% of them are directly employable, and a lot of further training has to be given by the corporate houses before they become employable. And recent studies by AICTE, our regulatory body for engineering, and also the industry body CII, have indicated a disconnect between the industry and academia, which also threatens employability. So, Government of India in the 12th plan is proposing to create a council for industry and higher education collaboration. It will be a permanent forum which will ensure that there is a continuous and regular interaction between the industry and academia. This will also ensure that the syllabi are regularly revised in consultation with the industry so as to factor in what they need. About 200 community colleges are proposed to be also created, and a national vocational education qualification framework has been created so as to encourage or so as to facilitate the vertical mobility of students from vocational training to higher education. Of course, this would succeed only if the societal respect for blue-collar jobs goes up. Otherwise, I think in India today, unfortunately, while I mentioned the figure of 1.5 million of engineering students intake, the equivalent figure for diploma holders, polytechnics, is hardly half of that. So I think primarily the respect for blue-collar jobs has to go up. Another area is, which is of concern is that our students who pass out, I think they have to be given those lifelong learning skills. In today's world, the corpus of knowledge seems to be doubling every few months, if not in earlier. And there will be a need to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because many times by the time you pass out from your engineering college, some of the things which you learned have already become obsolete. So I think this lifelong learning skills will have to be given. Mr. Devang Thakkar had mentioned about declaring the next 10 years as decade of innovation. I would also like to quote what the President of India in her address to Parliament on 4th June 2009 had said. She had underlined the importance of knowledge society in which we live today, and had mentioned that creativity, innovation, and enterprise hold the key to people and nations realizing their potential, and that government will ensure that its policies are imbued, that its policies on education and S&T, science and technology, are imbued with a spirit of innovation, so that creativity of 1 billion people is unleashed, and that next year should be dedicated as the decade of innovation. The 12th plan therefore focuses on the synergy between teaching and research. As a part of this decade of innovation, Mr. Sam Pitroda has also been heading a National Innovation Council. And I would also like to quote what he has said about innovation, because very interesting. India needs more frugal, distributed, affordable innovation strategy geared towards creating more frugal products and services that are affordable by the people at low incomes without compromising the efficiency and quality of such products. Indian approach of inclusive innovation can emerge as a model for world to emulate. Especially, he also mentioned that globally, the environmental constraints around climate change, energy, water and other resources would also call for more frugal models of production and consumption. Now, the several innovative things which have been done under this National Innovation Council is they have set up India Inclusive Innovation Fund, which will have a corpus of 5,000 crores of rupees, that is almost $1 billion. Of course, at the moment, in the first stage, they are only attempting 1/10 of that, that is 500 crores of rupees. 50 centers for research in frontier areas of science will be started, besides starting design innovation centers in different universities and educational institutions. The Delhi University, their Cluster Innovation Center, has started 2 courses, BTech in Innovation and BTech in Humanities. A very interesting concept has been started by the National Innovation Council is to bring in Hindi it's called Tod Phod Jod. That is, you break an equipment, you disassemble it and again reassemble it. So the idea is that students would learn the intricacies, how these equipments are working, etc. Jamia Millia and Delhi University have come together to create a hybrid university called Meta University, and under that they are going to launch a program of Masters in Mathematics Education. The idea being that Delhi University, which is good at mathematics, will give their part of the course, and Jamia Millia, which is good at media, media design, media, etc., that they will give the mass communication portion of the course, and they will jointly award the degrees. I think it's a very good initiative, and IIT Delhi and JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, are likely to join this Meta University concept in the near future. This will free the students from the tyranny of boundaries and constraints of location, and it will establish interdisciplinary nature between social sciences and other physical sciences and engineering and technology. In India, we have been encouraging this Lindor type of meetings where the Nobel laureates come and spend a week or 10 days with our young, bright students for a week or so. This has been happening for the last 4 or 5 years, and we are encouraging that program. Government are encouraging. IITs are, I think some of them might have even started thinking of catching bright young BTech students and taking them directly for PhD. BTech PhD programs are being planned. While we had a massive expansion, but we have suffered on account of lack of faculty. Even in IITs, I hope Ms. Devang Thakkar would bear me out, I think about 20% is a shortage of faculty, even in IITs, and our central education institutions have almost 35% vacancies. And other state and private universities have even higher vacancies. For taking care of this, we have raised the retirement age of our faculty from earlier 62 years to 65 years. And in fact, the select faculty can even go up to 70 years. The pay scales of our faculty have been revised considerably. Though unfortunately in India there is a wrong perception that teaching is a poorly paid job. In fact, a study has shown that on purchase power parity basis, the median payment to faculty is amongst the highest in the world. Is one of the, it's not that low as is being perceived. I think basically then for this wrong perception perhaps seems to be the decay or dilution in the societal respect which the teaching community used to command in India, say 2-3 decades back. We have to restore that prestige by the slogan "Teacher First." With a view to see that our faculty gets trained, because only a lighted lamp which can light other lamps. If our teachers get obsolete in their knowledge or in their domain knowledge, they would not be able to do their best to impart knowledge to our young students. So in this 12th plan, it is proposed to have international faculty-driven refresher programs for our faculty, where faculty from prestigious Ivy League institutions and also our good institutions from China, Singapore, NUS will be invited to give programs for our teachers. I would like to mention the National Mission on Education through ICT, which is about a $1 billion project in which we have almost connected all the universities with 1 Gbps connectivity, and about 20,000 colleges have been connected with more than 10 Mbps connectivity, and this connectivity is being proposed to be enhanced to 10 Gbps in the 12th plan. They have developed beautiful courses called NPTEL. In fact, what Mr. Devang Thakkar's institution teaches in IIT is already available in the form of a video course for people to be used free. It's available on YouTube. YouTube is called National Program on Technology Enhanced Learning. An Akash tablet has been developed by our mission. This would be hardly $35 to $40, and this will have ARM Cortex-8 processor of 1 GHz, 512 megabyte of RAM. It's Wi-Fi enabled and Android 4. So I think it's unbelievable that the prices have been brought down so much with this kind of a thrust, and this is likely to enable our students to get access to e-journals, to virtual laboratories which are being created. In fact, 80 to 90 virtual laboratories have been created, again mostly by IITs. Another very good effort, in fact, Mr. Thakkar's organization is doing that, IIT Bombay, is the encouragement for the use of free softwares, the LibreOffice, Linux, and in fact, the most important, Scilab, which replaces MATLAB. MATLAB can be very costly. So that is one which is being done, and about 80,000 people have already been trained on these softwares. And talk to a teacher, about 20,000 teachers have also been given refresher courses by IIT Kharagpur using the resources which this mission has provided. Robotics, the development of software for hardware, programming of robots training is being given. About 50 DTH channels, TV channels are now being proposed for giving educational programs. Now, besides these universities which are already existing, 20 new universities of research and innovation are proposed to be created in 12th plan. These would be given special funding, and perhaps they would be on line of China's C9, which perhaps I don't know whether it has become project 985 and 211 now, and Global 30 and now 13 of Japan, Quality Framework for HE in Thailand, or APEX program in Malaysia, or Operation Campus in France. This would be of that order. Educational reforms I have already mentioned, and for that there are several bills which are pending in the Parliament, and we intend to increase the number of junior fellowships for PhD, etc. by by many-fold. And 300 postdoc fellowships are being awarded and will be continued year after year to upgrade the quality of faculty. A national mission is being launched for faculty development. There is a technical quality improvement program under World Bank, under which about $500 million is going to be spent for faculty development, for improving the infrastructure, etc. It is proposed to give infrastructure status to education so that the banks will give priority lending for education. And even today we have a scheme under which for students getting educational loans in professional courses, their interest during the course period plus 1 year is given by the government, provided their parental income is below a particular level, which is reasonably high. Friends, India genuinely believes in universal brotherhood. In fact, this world is one family has been our sort of saying since time immemorial. And it was perhaps this philosophy which had made India have Taxila, Nalanda and Vikramshila University in starting from 4th BC. China and India actually at times are being called emerging economies. In fact, I would call them retrieving economies because until 1820, China and India had 50% of the global trade, 50% share in global trade. So it's becoming increasingly clear that no one country or no one discipline is adequately equipped to tackle major global challenges. Thus, teamwork, collaborative efforts, working through large networks and interdisciplinary convergences will be central to solving emerging global problems. So, I think China, India, Singapore, we in Southeast Asia and South Asia should again re-emerge as the hub of education and work together to solve these global problems. I'm also happy that we have an MOU with the NUS from the Delhi Technological University, and we would like to further enhance our such collaborations. I'm also told that there is a global aging taking place, because of which most of the developed countries, OECD countries, will have a shortfall of 35 million workforce by the year 2030 or so. I'm not sure, but I'm told China also will have a shortfall of a similar order. We in India would have added almost 130 million additional people, additional youth during this period, and perhaps 25 to 30 million of them can be used for these global services. So it would hopefully be a win-win situation, but that would be only if we are able to create that manpower pool of 500 million, which is one of the targets of Government of India by the year 2022. Well, our foreign collaborations and this learning from wherever it can come is actually said beautifully by our father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. He said, I do not want, I quote, I do not want my house to be walled in on all sides and my windows to be stuffed. I want the cultures of all the lands to be blown about freely in my house, but I refuse to be blown off by any. I refuse to be blown off my feet by any. I think we all, in the above spirit, need a vibrant community of learners who are willing to articulate, profess, and defend our core values while being open to the healthy winds of change. I think, though I know I have taken perhaps a little more time, but I am tempted to end my presentation by quoting Rabindranath Tagore, the Nobel laureate, one of his poems, with your permission. The poem goes like this: where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where the words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Thank you very much.